Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder is not impressed with the Liberals amending the Canada Elections Act. She will explain why. The province announced that Alberta truckers who cross the Canada-US border will now be vaccinated thanks to an agreement with Montana. And we hear from astronauts at the International Space Station who explain why they want more people to join them in outer space.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. There's a movement afoot by the Trudeau Liberals to amend the Canada Elections Act. It is currently seeing a second reading in Parliament. Many have a lot of concerns with the directions the Liberals are taking the act. Now, you can include Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder in that group. Harder says Canadians are not thinking of going back to the polls in the middle of a pandemic. And when it comes to Bill C-19, there are many areas of concern.
They grant the Chief Electoral Officer unprecedented powers to extend the vote time, allow for mail-in ballots to be counted past the deadline, determine what is satisfactory proof of identity and residence, and accelerate the timeline for these changes to go into effect. I don't believe I need to inform this House of what happens when a large portion of the public questions the validity of election results. Let's just say chaos ensues.
Harder really emphasized that the biggest aspect of the bill that Canadians will have a problem with is how mail-in ballots can still be counted even after Election Day. The Alberta government announced that it has reached an agreement to speed up the vaccination of Alberta truckers who transport essential goods into the United States. Alberta commercial truck drivers who are regulated will be able to receive the COVID-19 vaccine in Montana. That includes around 2,000 Alberta truck drivers who will be eligible for the program. Premier Jason Kenney says it was vital to protect our truckers who help to keep the supply chain moving.
By vaccinating truck drivers who travel across the Montana-Alberta border, we're protecting them from COVID-19 infection, and we're ensuring supply chain remains open during the pandemic. Truck drivers will be vaccinated with surplus vaccine supplies provided by Montana. There will be no cost to Albertans for this vaccine program, as the United States government will be covering the cost providing and administering the vaccine for the states. I want to thank Governor Greg Gianforte of Montana, with whom I spoke earlier this week, for his extremely generous cooperation in this initiative.
Now, this news by the province will have a big impact on the Lethbridge trucking industry. It means the truckers will have a chance to be vaccinated when they cross the border into Montana. Al Nelson is the dispatcher for CJD Trucking in Lethbridge, and he says it's good news for the trucking industry.
You know, we have a great relationship with the folks in Montana to the south of us, and to see them opening up and sharing the abundance that they have, and you know, a guy doesn't have to take a day off work or anything. You can just slide by there and run in, and doesn't need an appointment or anything, from what I can understand. All of our guys are in an age group that they can book now, and I know a couple of them have taken time to book and gotten either the first shot. I don't know if anyone's got the second yet, so I don't see any of our guys using it, but in saying that, it could happen next week that a guy happens to be going down that way and will decide to stop.
Around 800 commercial carriers cross the Alberta and Montana border at the Coots border crossing each and every day. One man is dead following a collision between two semi-trucks earlier today on Highway 3 near Kip Road near Colehurst. Police say one semi, which was hauling lumber, caught fire as a result of the accident. The driver, a man from Granham, died on scene. An RCMP traffic reconstructionist has been called in to help police with their investigation. Traffic along Highway 3 was diverted for many hours while police and firefighters attended to the scene. For this week's poll question, we are asking you if you are planning on hitting the road and planning to leave the province for your summer vacation. We added up the results, and around 57% of you said yes. In fact, you are planning on leaving the province to enjoy your summer holidays. Be sure to log on to bridgecitynews.ca again on Monday to check out our newest poll question. The City of Lethbridge announced that to help limit the spread of COVID-19, it is moving all in-person services online beginning Monday. That will include paying parking tickets, renewing dog licenses, paying utilities, and scheduling building permits. More information can be found on the City of Lethbridge website. Lethbridge Family Centre and the Interfaith Food Bank have been working together for 15 years, bringing families the Chinook Country Kitchen program. Anyone can participate, and in a non-pandemic year, hands-on training would have been provided for kids and their families. Now, you can still take part over Zoom, And as Ainsley O'Reilly explains, virtual classes have opened doors for other people to join in.
The Interfaith Food Bank's Country Kitchen program has shifted its 6 to 8 classes per week to Zoom. Cooking classes have anywhere between 25 and 40 attendees. Some of their programs include Big Chef, Little Chef, and Kids in the Kitchen. Coordinators say that going virtual has provided opportunities for those who may not have had them otherwise.
I've had multiple generations actually cooking in a Zoom class, and it's been one way for them to keep those connections with their grandchildren, to be able to see them, especially when the restrictions have become very tight on families and those with health problems. It's actually allowed them, and I think that's been really interesting to see, that it's been a way to allow people that maybe previously didn't have as much access or mobility.
The partnership with Family Center serves more than 400 kids and their families. The Better Beginnings program, shifting to online, has better helped mothers pre- and postnatal.
We've actually had 6 babies born this year in our group, and it's been wonderful because as this cooking group has come together, there's been a lot of supports that have been offered.
The kitchen has 6 units, but for now will remain virtual until the nonprofit can return slowly.
4 people limit is what we were approved for, and once this restriction is lifted, we're transitioning back into that and making sure we're starting slow and integrating people back into those more in-person sessions.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
May is Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Month. That means the annual MS Walk in our city is ready to kick off at the end of the month virtually. A local woman has participated in the MS Walk for the past 14 years. As Micah Quinn explains, her walking group has raised over $260,000 for MS since they first participated.
Janine Cassin's daughter Rochelle was diagnosed with MS 17 years ago, and in 2006, the family got on board to Walk for MS to raise awareness and funds for research to combat the disease.
Every year since is Cassin's crew, which is comprised of lots of family and friends, and we have raised as a team, which is Cassin's crew, a little over $265,000 since we started. And we're very pleased with everyone that donates with us and walks with us. It's just a really good, fun time.
MS is a chronic autoimmune disease that affects the vision, mobility, and memory of many Canadians.
And approximately 1 in every 400 Canadians lives with MS, while 12 Canadians are diagnosed every day. MS is the most common neurological disease among young adults, with 60% of adults with MS between 20 and 49.
Cassin says that she's hoping that the Lethbridge MS Walk will raise $80,000 this year.
We also have a couple of other big teams that raise a lot of money, and one of them has already up to $30,000.
For more information on the MS Walk, you can visit mswalk.ca. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
While most of the new provincial restrictions came into effect May 5th, all students from kindergarten to grade 12 went to online classes. These new measures are part of the government's Scenario 3 learning strategy. Bridge City News spoke with the Medicine Hat Public School Division and Medicine Hat Catholic Board. Officials from both say teachers are ready to go, but stress the importance of providing resources for students' mental health.
Really mindful of how everyone who's part of our system is doing. We try and communicate really clearly which mental health supports are available to our students throughout the change in restrictions and how to contact those people. All of those staff are retained and they're urged to reach out to our families. So yeah, we are concerned about it.
Particularly given the context of the last year or so, we do have all of our counselors in the jurisdiction available, both to schedule online meetings or we could even arrange to have students come to the schools to meet with the counselors if that's more appropriate. Yeah, so we definitely are taking that very seriously and keeping a close eye on the discussions that are happening with teachers and the students online to see are there students that might need that support, and then making sure that we're quickly responding to those needs as they come up.
Students across the province will be learning from home until May the 25th. It's not all doom and gloom when it comes to restrictions in our province. 2 popular events have merged together in Lethbridge at Exhibition Park this weekend. BCN's Naveen Day has that story.
Expos are a great way to explore new wares while supporting local businesses. And this weekend, 2 events are sure to appeal to you. The Mother's Day Gift Expo has been a long-running tradition here in Lethbridge. Courtney Samuels, who is the event's organizer, gives us a preview of what you can expect.
The Mother's Day Gift Expo has been going on for quite some time in Lethbridge. It's the 16th annual, and it is a bunch of local small business, local artisans around town that, actually it's around southern Alberta, that gather and they promote their wares, they showcase their talents. There's artists, there's creators, there's people that bake and make stuff. So it's just a whole bunch of small businesses trying to support one another.
And while it is an unwritten rule to never forget Mom, who could possibly forget loving on our furry little family members?
Typically, the Pet Expo, we do support our local charities around town, and we also typically have animals there that people can see. But of course, with the recent restrictions that we do have, we aren't allowed gatherings. So unfortunately, there are going to be no animals that people can gather around and pet this time, but we do have individuals that make and create things for animals that they can stop by and pick up for their creatures.
Both events take place on Saturday from 10 to 4 at Exhibition Park. Admission is free. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Mother's Day is coming up this weekend on Sunday. It's a time to really celebrate our moms and show them just how much we love and appreciate them. Noelle Mering is a mother of 6, and she co-authored a book called The Theology of Home, The Spiritual Art of Homemaking. Noelle says being a working mom of the 21st century has a number of challenges, and she has some advice for working mothers.
But for working women, my message to them was just to, you're probably trying to do a lot, you're balancing a lot, and it's going to be hard. You're going to do it imperfectly, as we all are, and to give yourself a lot of grace and keep trying to put that best effort, day in and day out with a good optimism and good cheer, but also a lot of grace for when it doesn't all come together.
Noelle will also discuss how the role of the homemaker has changed over the years. That interview is coming up later in our newscast. The Alberta government announced that it is investing $1.5 million to increase access to family resource centres. Officials say the funding will better support families and people with disabilities. Family resource centres provide tools, resources, and information to help families navigate the disability services available to them. More than 15,000 Alberta families use the Family Support for Children with Disability Services. Family resource centres operate in many regions of southern Alberta, including Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, and the Crow's Nest Pass. The Saskatchewan government says restaurants in Regina will be allowed to reopen for indoor dining on May 17th. The province's restaurants will have to follow all COVID-19 health guidelines in place across the province. Only 4 people will be allowed per table, and distancing of tables will also have to be observed. The province tightened public health measures in Regina in March as variants of the virus surged. Saskatchewan Health Minister Paul Merriman says the downward trend is helping the province to slowly reopen.
I think we've seen a downward trend in our hospitalization in our ICU, and that's directly correlated to adhering to the public health measures and getting vaccinated. And the amount of vaccines that we've done in the last few weeks have certainly helped out in driving those numbers down, because we know the vaccines, even one shot, will severely help you in making sure that there are no severe outcomes.
The Manitoba government is offering paid sick leave for those affected by COVID-19. Employers are to be provided with up to $600 a worker for up to 5 full days. Eligible reasons for leaving include testing, vaccination side effects, and self-isolation of showing COVID-19 symptoms. And like Alberta, Manitoba is doubling fines for anyone repeatedly flouting public health orders.
The vast majority of Manitobans are following these fundamentals. They're following the rules. That's important, and I say again, thank you for doing that, and please keep doing that. But there is a small, selfish minority of people that aren't doing their part. And in doing so, they're putting the health of themselves and others at risk. And I would say to those folks, you will pay your fine. And if you do not, you will not be driving your car. We will not issue you a driver's license. You can put your car up on blocks and you can leave it there until you pay your fine.
A Canadian on death row in Montana for almost 40 years says he has mixed feelings after legislation to resume execution in that state was defeated. Ronald Smith, who's originally from central Alberta, has been on death row since 1983 for killing 2 young men near East Glacier, Montana. He said he thought the legislation would pass, and he warned his family that his execution would likely go ahead. Smith said he came to terms with the idea after nearly 4 decades alone in a cell block, and he says the death penalty might be preferable to more time in prison. Federal Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole says he supports a waiver to the rules that guard vaccine trade secrets to make it easier for developing countries to produce their own COVID-19 vaccines.
We need to work with the Americans on ways, even including suspending temporarily intellectual property, to help the world fight COVID together. We have to do that. We also have to have a plan to replenish what Mr. Trudeau took from COVAX because he had failed on domestic vaccine procurement. I believe once the provinces are at full deployment capacity of their capacity to get vaccines out and we have inventory, that is when we can start exploring how to use that inventory to help allies, to help other countries in the world.
29 people were recovered from a big rig that was stopped near San Antonio, Texas. Police say the traffic stop is being investigated for possible human smuggling.
There was a suspicious big rig that was driving eastbound on I-10. A passerby called the police after noticing some suspicious activity, maybe some people in the back of the big rig. The first officer arrived, initiated a traffic stop. That was a park police officer. The vehicle pulled in here. As soon as the park officer went to contact the driver, the back door opened and several people left from the back portion of the rig. We were able to contact 29 individuals. One of those individuals was transported to the hospital. The driver is in custody, and again, this is an ongoing investigation that the HSI will handle and provide updates on.
A 6th grade girl brought a gun to her school in Idaho and opened fire. She shot and wounded 2 classmates and a custodian before being disarmed by her teacher. Police say fortunately the victims were shot in their limbs and are expected to survive.
Our adult was shot once as a through and through in an extremity and able to be released shortly after being evaluated and treated in the emergency room. Our 2 pediatric patients, one was shot once in an extremity and may require surgery in the future. The second was potentially shot twice, but there were 2 injuries, one to an upper extremity, one to a lower extremity. Fortunately, we were blessed that each of these individuals sustained non-life-threatening extremity injuries.
60 years after Alan Shepard became the first American in space, people are on the verge of following in his cosmic footsteps. Speaking from the International Space Station, NASA astronauts say they want more people to experience space.
And 60 years later, you know, it's pretty amazing. I was not born, of course, when that first event happened, and so it's phenomenal to think that, you know, here we are living in space for long duration, which is something, you know, that they could only project in the future. I think it's very exciting that more and more people are going to have access to space in the coming years.
Yeah, we've always enjoyed this incredible thing called space, but we always want more people to be able to experience it as well. So I think this is a great step in the right direction.
It's sometimes challenging being up here, but I have just been having a blast. We've been doing some great work, and the opportunities to stay up here longer, it feels to me like it would be just a bonus. If I got to stay up here longer, without any more final exams, no less, no more training. So it's just a good deal all around.
It'd be so much fun being in space. We had a fairly warm Friday here today with light shower activity in many regions of southwestern Alberta, and that trend will continue into the weekend. Full weather details are on deck. We had a mainly overcast day with lots of wind and light rain in the city. Jeanette Rocher is back with a complete look at our weekend weather forecast. Jeanette, it may be an umbrella and rubber boots kind of weekend.
Well, I think it could be hell because starting this evening before the dawn anyways, we're looking at a 40% chance of showers. Into Saturday, lots of rain, high of 6 degrees. We're looking at 5 to 10 millimeters of rain and 50K winds as well. So it's going to be a wet, windy one. Into Sunday, Mother's Day, 8 degrees the high, periods of rain as well, actually 60% chance of showers on Sunday. Not easing up until, of course, Monday, right? So unfortunately, we won't be able to have the barbecue or the picnic on Mother's Day, but into the rest of the week, we are looking at a warming trend. 14 degrees the high, mix of sun and cloud, up to 17 on Tuesday, 18 Wednesday, and 19 degrees on Thursday as we look towards the 7-day forecast. So unfortunately, I wish that was reversed and we could have the nicer days this weekend, but it's just not meant to be, unfortunately. 17 is our high average for this time of year. 3, the average low. 31 was our high temperature back in 1987. And in 2000, we had our chilliest day on record, which was -6. 5:58 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset this evening, right at 8:58 p.m. So nice long day of daylight. Well, we have it anyways before the rain begins this weekend. Over on the West Coast tomorrow, looking not too bad. 14 degrees the high for Victoria. 14 also in Vancouver. Rain though, lots of rain at Edmonton expected tomorrow, 10 to 15 millimeters, 8 degrees the high there, 5 degrees the high in Calgary, 5 millimeters of rain, 50k winds there as well. Now over in the rest of the prairies, not quite as wet. A mix of sun and cloud in Saskatoon, 13 the high, 11 degrees the high in Regina, 13 degrees rather the high in Winnipeg with lots of sunshine. 30k winds for most of those prairie cities, not too bad. Could be a little bit windier in Winnipeg tomorrow though. Now here in Toronto, we're seeing a chance of rain, risk of a thunderstorm by tomorrow afternoon, 14 degrees the high in Ottawa, 11 degrees the high. Lots of rain expected there as well. Rain also expected in Montreal tomorrow with a high of 15 degrees. Over in Atlantic Canada, mix of sun and cloud in Fredericton, 11 degrees the high, 8 degrees the high in Halifax. Halifax seeing a lot of rain tomorrow, up to 20 millimeters. Rain also expected in Charlottetown, 6 degrees the high, 5 degrees the high in St. John's, Newfoundland. Periods of rain and some fog patches as well. So there you have it. That is your weekend forecast. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there.
Canada's unemployment rate jumped 8.1% last month from the 7.5% in March as new lockdown measures impacted businesses. Stats Canada says the economy lost close to 207,000 jobs. That nearly wiped out the 303,000 jobs gained in March. CIBC senior economist Royce Mendez says there could even be more job losses in May. He says the curve, however, is bending in some regions of the country, and with vaccinations increasing, that should help the labor market begin to recover in June. TELUS says its first quarter profit fell 5.7% over a year ago. The company says higher expense items offset revenue growth at many of its business units. The company's net income fell to $331 million, while its adjusted earnings declined to 27 cents per share. That is down from 32 cents in the same quarter last year. Operating revenues and other income rose to $4 billion from $3.7 billion in the first quarter of 2020. Revenue from the TELUS mobile network edged down 0.5%, mostly due to reduced roaming fees due to travel restrictions. Air Canada's first quarter loss widened to $1.3 billion as COVID-19 restrictions continue to batter travel. That compared to a $1 billion loss in the same quarter last year. Revenue plunged to $729 million from $3.7 billion in the first 3 months of 2020 as traffic measured in revenue passenger miles dropped 89.5%. The airline reached a deal last month with Ottawa for $5.9 billion in aid. That included funds earmarked to provide refunds for flights canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Enbridge is reporting a first quarter profit of $1.9 billion. The pipeline operator says that compared with a loss of $1.4 billion a year earlier. That's when it took a number of large one-time charges, including a $2 billion charge related to derivatives. Its most recent quarter included a gain of $300 million related to the mark-to-market value of derivatives used to manage foreign exchange risk. Operating revenue was up from $12 to $12.2 billion compared to the first 3 months of 2020. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 181 points in the day to finish at 19,473. The Dow was up 229 points to 34,778. The S&P 500 was up 30 points to 4233, and the Nasdaq was up 119 points on the day to 13,752. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 12 cents to 64.83 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 4 cents to 2.97 US. Gold was up 16.02 to 18.3124 US an ounce, and silver was up 14 cents to 27.45 US an ounce. Wheat is at $354 per metric ton. Barley's at $360, canola's at $9.98, and corn is at $415 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 55 cents to $116.03. Feeder cattle were up $1.25 to $131.73. and lean hogs were up 58 cents to $111.98. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 82.43 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government announced that it has reached an agreement to speed up the vaccination of truckers who transport essential goods into the United States. Alberta commercial truck drivers who are regulated will be able to receive the COVID-19 vaccine in Montana. That includes around 2,000 Alberta truck drivers who will be eligible for the program. Well, Mother's Day is coming up on Sunday, and coming up shortly, we speak with a mother of 6 who co-authored a book discussing the challenges many moms have today balancing their family life and careers. Catch the informative interview with Noelle Mering in just a moment. Every Mother's Day, we buy gifts for our lovely moms and take time to honor them. But does modern society still hold motherhood in high esteem, or has this maybe diminished somewhat as a calling? To discuss this in more detail is Noelle Mering. She's a mother of 6 and the co-author of The Theology of Home, The Spiritual Art of Homemaking. Noelle joins me from Ventura, California. Noelle, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Now, how has the perception and the role of a homemaker really changed over the decades, in your opinion?
Well, I think we get a hint of how much has changed just with the word homemaker. I think most people bristle even at the mention of that word. It sounds like something maybe archaic or something silly or something that you do when you can't maybe hack it in the real world. At the same time, I think people have a renewed understanding on how important home is. So we've returned to a lot of domestic crafts like making bone broth and having a garden, planting food in our backyard, or knitting even. But we haven't quite connected the dots between the importance of these things and the importance of the person who's caring for the home. And we've all been in our homes so much over the past year because of COVID that I think a lot of people are trying to maybe re-examine and reevaluate how their home life has been functioning, how healthy it is, how much it's flourishing or not, and maybe making adjustments here and there. So the homemaker, though, is a key part of that. And even if in some ways anyone who lives at home, whether you be professional or a man or anything, in some ways we all are in some sense making a home or called to, even if it's not full time. But there is a real dignity of the job of doing that full time that I think we've lost respect for, and we need to reclaim that.
So what is your message to moms who are not able to stay at home full time with their children?
I think my message to them would be the same as to any woman, just that you have a great dignity in what you're doing, even if it's not full time. So a lot of women are in a predicament where they can't, and they deeply desire to be home more. And that's one of the unspoken things that I think we don't really think about in society, is that we're constantly thinking that that the preference is to be working. Well, there's a lot of working women who wish that they could be at home, and to start thinking in that way, that that this is something that oftentimes we desire more than we're willing to admit. But for working women, my message to them was just to, you're probably trying to do a lot, you're balancing a lot, and it's going to be hard. You're going to do it imperfectly, as we all are, and to give yourself a lot of grace and keep trying to put that best effort, day in and day out, with a good optimism and good cheer, but also a lot of grace for when it doesn't all come together.
Now, your book is filled with some beautiful pictures, encouraging quotes, and stories from women. Who are some of the women featured, and what are some of their powerful messages?
Well, we have a great variety of women. So from a young mom who just had her first baby, to a professional working mother of 9 who's an architect, to a dear friend of mine who's actually an ER nurse, and is trying to keep more of that working mom who longs to spend more time at home. And then we've got a stay-at-home mom of 8 children, a grandmother, a single woman who has not had children but still feels this call to be fruitful. And our message throughout this was to show that it's the common thread throughout these women is not that their lives look exactly the same or that their circumstances are the same, but rather that they're all striving to respond to the circumstances and the calling that a life that God has called them to, and respond with a yes and an embrace of that life in a spirit of service and a desire to really be fruitful in cooperation with his plan for what he's got going on for them. So that was the common thread in all these different lives that I think we as women need to and can remember, and that we have this great capacity to really serve people around us. And I think that's been lost in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Noelle, you write in your book that culture traded fruitfulness for power and control. Some may wonder if you're actually saying that a woman's fruitfulness is exclusive to fertility and nurturing.
Yeah, no, we're definitely not saying that it's a purely biological sense of fruitfulness. It rather is, it has a deeply spiritual connotation. And we really use that in a theme throughout the book, that there's, there is this way in which women have this capacity to receive others in our prayer life, into our homes, as mothers and welcoming babies. But also that we have this ability, it's connected to our ability to, our instinct for fruitful relationships, that we want to, not only receive people, but to encourage them, to nurture them, to make them have better lives, to help to be tender, to help heal their wounds, and facilitate God healing their wounds. So, I think it's a deep desire on women's hearts. But we've had this metric that our purpose is not this sort of thing, but rather a metric of power, that we are supposed to be powerful, and that's our goal. And I think one of the things we dig into is the fact that women are powerful. It's a fact, but it's not our purpose. And that's a very different setup if you think of it as your purpose versus just a fact of your life. Because once you make it your purpose, you become induced to a lot of anxiety, your competition, comparison, all these sorts of kind of ill feelings that are the sort of rotten fruit of making power your purpose.
Many moms obviously worry about their children, doesn't matter what age, whether 2, 3, or even 23 years of age. You believe that while worry can offer a defense against the trials of life, it can also create jealousy and envy. Can you explain?
Sure. Well, I think, one of the things we dive into is the fact that worry has a similar, it's similar to contemplation on the surface, but if you dig into it, they're actually quite opposite of one another. So worry is sort of a sense of trying to control a situation. If I think about this problem and all of the possible ways that things can go wrong or get worse, that somehow by thinking about this or obsessing over it, I can kind of contain it and keep the bad thing from happening. But we know obviously that's not true. And contemplation rather is to, take it into our prayer life. So we can take that same problem and think about it, but think about it in a way that we're surrendering it to God, and we're pleading to Him to guide us through this with a trust that He can. And so rather than containing it, controlling it, we're really opening ourselves up to God's will in regard with whatever that might be, and stepping out in faith and trust in His plan for us.
Many moms like to compare themselves to other women for their accomplishments and the ability to multitask. Why should women remind themselves not to really get caught up in that?
Yeah, I think that is a problem that's so exacerbated today, obviously, with the advent of social media. Everyone's susceptible to it, and I think it might be a lifelong struggle for most of us women. But I think it's really it's a waste of thought and a waste of time to put energy into comparing ourselves. There's always going to be someone more beautiful, with a better house, with a seemingly happier marriage, or better vacation or something, and you'll never arrive to the end of that struggle if you keep focusing on it. So one of the ways that I think we can shift in our minds away from that is to redefine ourselves, that our value is not based on the affirmation of other people so much as it is based on being daughters of God, of a loving Father. And that's where our dignity comes from. That can really root us and ground us.
Now, you really explain in your book that a woman becomes who she is meant to be by drawing closer to God. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Sure. I think, if our fundamental definition is in connection to Him, then it is in uniting ourselves to His will, coming closer to Him, so that we might be able to reflect Him, in which we become more ourselves. So I think oftentimes people think that a relationship with God will sort of like subsume your personality, or you won't live your true self. You won't, and that's a very modern notion that we need to be individuals based on, this expression of this very unique, it's something inside of us. Well, that expression of a unique identity really comes through that fact that we're irreplaceable in his eyes, that He loves us as particular individuals in a familial way. And I think that's where we find that sort of irreplaceability, but it's not through making sure that we're expressing ourselves in our unique identities in ways that are really affirmed and seen by others. Rather, it's that we are, in becoming closer to Him, we're able to love more, and sin makes us boring. That's the thing that I think we don't realize. Sin actually is a flattening of the human person, whereas grace is actually a fulfillment of the human person, and that's where our focus could be.
The role of a mom oftentimes involves a lot of serving, and many hold their children a little too tightly, which becomes more exposed as children get older. Why is detachment to our children necessary and the best thing for our children?
It's such a good question. And, one things we're trying to figure out is, that there are two extremes that parents can fall into, and mothers maybe in particular, either too neglectful, although that's more rare, but the more likely extremes that we become too controlling, or that we use our children almost to serve our own egos, or to reflect us into the world in a way that's positive. And I think we all know that real leadership and real, whether it be through the father or through any parent, is going to be for the sake of empowering that child to actually go out into the world with confidence and courage and making their own decisions and able to rule themselves rather than be ruled by outside, externally. But it's creating children who can, it's ultimately, we're working ourselves out of a job. We're mothering them so for the sake of the fact that eventually they won't need to be mothered. And it's a sadness, but it's a sign of the transitory nature of parenting, but it is the best way to really be a loving parent.
That's the biggest thing for me too as a father with my two children is just to let go and let God and let them, sometimes they fall flat on their face. They're like, don't go down that path. I've been down that path. It'll lead to destruction. They're like, I'm going down that path. All right, you got to be hands off and just let them learn on their own, I guess, right? And that's a real challenge as for mothers and fathers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. You want to play God in a way, just say, I know what's going to happen. I know, I see the future. But, as you said, they have to come to it, their full freedom. And once they come to the good, choosing the good things out of their full freedom, they'll embrace it more deeply, than if it's kind of pushed on them or, coerced upon them.
Now, Noelle, you're right that we all have a fundamental desire for community. Even the busiest of moms can struggle with loneliness. What's the big difference then between isolation and solitude?
That's a profound question. I think isolation it connotes something negative, whereas solitude it's something active that we're choosing. And moms have a hard time getting that solitude or that silence that is so necessary for important to foster a prayer life. And you can feel as a mom sometimes that you just are nonstop being touched, or there's noise going on everywhere. And it's really hard to find that silence. And so, we talk about trying to foster, even as busy moms, interior silence in our soul. So we can, even despite the chaos, kind of retreat into just for a moment and connect with our Lord. And we can do that in really physical ways with the mundane work of the house that, as I'm washing the dishes, I can say, we are washing the dishes, Christ is with me in this, even in this, and the folding of the clothes. I can say a prayer for the person who's going to wear that clothes. I'm going to say a prayer now for my son as I fold his shirt, or for my husband. And these are great avenues. And I think that's really the spirit of theology of home, is that we're recognizing that it's through the material world that the spiritual world, we can connect to these worlds. We're not meant to be disembodied. We have bodies. Christ came and he's incarnate. And our lives too are reflections of that as well. So how we bridge these two worlds, our material world and our spiritual world, and the daily tasks of life. This is a really beautiful opportunity for us, and one that I think we shouldn't take lightly or think is unimportant.
Some people feel that when we become lost in life, that's when we most yearn for home. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a universal longing. And my co-author Carrie Gress, when we wrote our first book, Theology of Home 1, the subtitle is Finding the Eternal in the Everyday. She was listening to a song about a homecoming, and it really struck her. We all just love homecomings. We see soldiers coming home, being reunited with their families, or homecomings when children, the prodigal son, he comes home. These things are powerful and evocative. And I think it's because home really is this foretaste of heaven, where we can belong, where we can feel safe, where we're valued just for who we are, not for what we can do for someone, or, in a utilitarian way. These are all what home can point us to. And it speaks to the deepest longings of our heart, and ultimately is a whisper of what heaven, I think, will ultimately be like.
So Noelle, any final thoughts on the best way of honoring our moms?
Yeah, well, you could give them Theology of Home, the book, but the best way of honoring our moms, I think, is just to recognize, really spend some time. I just in anticipation of Mother's Day, I spent some time thinking about my mom and what I've learned from her. And on our website, theologyofhome.com, actually, I'm publishing an article today about with different women and what the best wisdom that they learned from their moms. And I think that's a nice Mother's Day present that they can all share, that we've thought about and really considered what we learned from them. Mothers love that. And I think it can be as simple as that, maybe written in a card or talked to, spoken to her over brunch or over a phone call. I think that would be meaningful, and it really reflects some deep consideration too.
Noelle, thanks so much for joining me today from Ventura, California.
Thanks for having me.
The Trudeau Liberals are still envisioning $10 per day daycare for Canadians, but not all are in favor of it. Joining me now to discuss this and other big stories from the Hill is Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder. Rachel, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney was not in favor of the Liberals' plan since he says it only works for those who work 9 to 5 and will be union run. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Hal, thank you so much for having me out tonight. And certainly you're asking a really important question. You know, there are many parents across this country who work, you know, what we might call non-traditional hours. And of course, also with COVID, you know, more and more people are needing to adjust the way that their children are looked after. That being the case, you know, I think what we see from the Liberals is kind of a one-size-fits-all type of approach, which isn't necessarily the case. But more importantly, I think what we see here is, you know, yet it's the same promise that they've been repeating for years, just repeated once again. So it's a matter of perpetual promising and no action. And that's really what this is, you know, an example of. And so they made the promise. We have yet to see whether or not they'll follow through on it. But I think it's important to know here as well that really it should be left up to parents. You know, as a conservative, I very much believe that parents have the freedom to choose, that they should be able to determine where their money goes. And then, of course, you know, you'll have people say, well, it's you know, it's going to be free or minimal cost. Well, let's be honest, governments have no way of generating an income other than taxation. So actually, with all due respect, Canadians will be paying for this daycare. And they may not want that to be run by the state.
Many Canadians are also very concerned with the Liberals' Bill C-10, which many argue would infringe upon our freedom of speech. Calgary MP Michelle Rempel already blasted the Liberals on this bill. The Liberal Party says, listen, we just want to control the amount of fake news on YouTube and social media. Well, what do you think?
Well, who gets to determine what is fake news and what isn't, you know? Bottom line is this: I will never be in favor of more government control over free speech. I believe in our charter rights. I believe in Section 2B that gives us the ability to speak freely. And we already have the criminal code. And within that, there are sections that protect Canadians against libel, against slander, against hate speech. And so perhaps instead of more legislation, perhaps we actually just need to enforce the legislation that is already in existence. So when it comes to Bill C-10, what we see is actually, you know, a government that is wanting to reach way too far into our social media platforms and dictate what we can and cannot show. You know, I mean, this legislation would go so far as to regulate, you know, the videos that you post of your kids or your cat or you dancing in the kitchen. And you know, it's just unnecessary. We don't need or want a government that to do that.
Or do you feel that maybe perhaps as well, it may not be fitting with their agenda and their ideologies? So, hey, let's regulate that and let's cut it off at the head.
Hal, I think there's certainly potential for that. You know, I've done a fair bit of reading with regards to Bill C-10 and talked to a number of different experts on this topic. And certainly, you know, they would say that there is a great deal of potential for the Liberals to abuse authority when it comes to this. And by that, what I mean is they get to dictate the terms. So they kind of can make themselves the internet czar, if you will, being the arbiters of truth and what is allowed to stand and what isn't. That's a really scary place for us as a country to head toward. We don't want to do that. We do not want to do that. We must defend freedom of speech.
Amen to that. Rachel, a top government official defended his department's procurement practices recently following allegations that the Liberals have continued to award hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts to a single network technology provider. Now, Rachel, would this not essentially shut out competing bidders?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem here. You know, so I, as official opposition critic for digital government, this is under my portfolio, and so I've been paying careful attention to this. Essentially, you know, what appears to be happening is there seems to be a sole source contract that is granted to a particular company over and over and over and over again. It's actually not just a one-off, it's perpetual, like what you're saying, which then of course is keeping other companies away from the table, unable to bid, and then of course unable to secure some of these government contracts, which, as you can imagine, are fairly attractive contracts. And so there's a problem here, because we know that when competition is thwarted, when it is not allowed, we know that ultimately the taxpayer pays far more. And what our goal should be, what my goal for Canadians is that they would get the best service at the best price. And when competition doesn't take place, again, Canadians are the ones who get hurt in the end.
Now, you've gone on record of being a big supporter of Alberta's oil and gas industry, Rachel, and believe that the Trudeau Liberals may not be quite as supportive. You say that Ottawa fails to realize there are technological breakthroughs that reduce carbon emissions. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think here in Canada, we lead the world in terms of carbon capture technology and in terms of making the oil and gas sector increasingly environmentally friendly. We should be boasting about the technology that we have, about the innovation that is taking place within the industry. And unfortunately, the Prime Minister is taking the opposite approach, where he actually seems to be, giving the industry this big black mark, which is just totally unfair. Hell, we're talking about an industry that upholds the greatest environmental standards in the world. We're talking about an industry where human rights are not only protected, but I would say where some of the highest paying jobs are found. We're looking at an industry where some of the greatest advances in technology and innovation are taking place. This is an industry that deserves to be celebrated. And with all due respect, without hydrocarbons, which is really what we're talking about here, life as we know it fails to exist. I mean, everything from the shoes we wear to the glasses we have, to the cars we drive, to having our homes heated. This is our reality. We're talking about the fuel of life. And I think that there is a great deal of importance in terms of being able to advocate for this industry and make sure that it thrives.
Let's talk about those two words now, carbon tax, two words that leave a very bitter taste in the mouths of many Canadians, including here in Alberta. Rachel, now I've seen images, and I remember Conservative Party leader Aaron O'Toole saying that he was going to sign a document to do away with the federal carbon tax, yet he recently came out with his own carbon tax plan. And that didn't sit well with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and many other Canadians who feel that Mr. O'Toole may have gone back on his word. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I actually certainly, I can understand where their frustration comes from. I can understand where their point of view comes from. At the end of the day, I think, what the leader was trying to do here is he was looking at polling, he was looking at popular public opinion, he was looking at the fact that the political left has owned this issue for so long. And because public opinion is on that side of wanting a carbon tax, he went in that direction with his own creative improvisation. That said, I think other parts of our plan that are worth highlighting are things like, increased attention and investment being made towards technology, towards innovation, towards carbon capture, towards alternate fuels, and I think wanting to make that comeback in terms of doing two things, caring for the environment, but also making sure that we're not thwarting our economic advantage as a country and our place on the world stage.
Here in southwestern Alberta, as you know, being in the constituency right now, we're really big when it comes to agriculture. Very, very big. It's a big part of our industry here and Canada's GDP. Rachel, can you explain right now what help is readily available to our farmers who may need a little bit of help during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to our producers, and of course I'm extremely proud of them, I believe that agriculture is our unsung superpower. These are the men and women who feed not only this country, but the world. And I'm incredibly proud of the technology and the innovation and the creativity that comes out of this industry and the way that people conduct themselves. It's amazing. And I wish every Canadian would join me in celebrating these individuals and all that they've made possible. Look, Hal, at the end of the day, I don't know that this is a group that's necessarily asking for handouts. I would say more than anything here in the constituency of Lethbridge, what I'm hearing from producers is that they actually want the government to stay out. They want to see as little red tape as possible, as little regulation as possible. They want to be given the freedom to thrive, to be creative, to be innovative, to produce food that not only feeds our nation, but feeds the globe.
Now that millions of COVID-19 vaccines are flooding the provinces right now, Rachel, do you feel that maybe Prime Minister Justin Trudeau may call a late spring election? And is your party prepared for it?
Yeah, Hal, there's certainly been a lot of speculation around this, and so it's a good question. It's certainly one of the questions that I've had. Are we going to have a spring election? Are we going to have a fall election? Is there going to be an election at all in 2021? Those are good questions. Here's what I can tell you. When I look at budget 2021, which just came out about a week and a half ago, when I look at that, what I see is I see more of an election platform than I do a plan to get through the pandemic. And so there's definitely points within it that are quite partisan in nature, very beneficial to the Liberals. I think the Prime Minister is going to keep his options open. That's really what I believe is happening here. And so he's going to continue to look at the polls. And if the polling shows that he, would likely win a majority government, he's going to push the big red button. He's going to go for it.
Now, the reason I was wondering about the election, potential of an election, is from all of the Liberal handouts here, but at the same time, we got to pay that money back. Those are taxpayers' dollars, and our debt, Rachel, is approaching $1.3 trillion. Is this sustainable?
Yeah, Hal, it's a great question. It's a really good question, and I think it's one that many Canadians are asking. We're trying just to manage a household budget. When we hear a number like 1.3 trillion, it's hard for us to fully, wrap our heads around. But when it comes to that amount of debt, we're talking about, the inevitable, which is increased taxes and or a cutback on social programs. Which, of course, as Canadians, we value those things. We value universal healthcare. We value knowing that the poor are going to be looked after if they hit hard times. Those sorts of things are important to us. When a government takes on this amount of debt, it is inevitable that it will have to be paid back through taxation.
Now, you mentioned on social media recently that it's outrageous that everyone around Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was aware of the misconduct allegations against General Jonathan Vance, but the PM didn't know anything about it. You feel the Liberals may be involved in a cover-up. Can you explain?
Sure. One of the things that I observe here, Hal, is that the Prime Minister continuously is changing his answers. And I would say with the amount of information that is out there and the people that were close to him who knew, it would appear to me that the Prime Minister would have to be willfully ignorant to not know something. Like he would have to purposely put horse blinders on in order to not see this. I mean, his chief of staff knew. The Minister for National Defense knew. Like these are the types of people that should be reporting directly to the Prime Minister and bringing him in on scenarios like this, especially when the Prime Minister is claiming to be a feminist Prime Minister. You would hope that he would be interested in knowing about something like this, and then you would hope that he would be interested in taking action on behalf of these women who have these allegations, and they're very serious allegations, and they should be treated as such. So yes, given the information that I have, given the shiftiness in the Prime Minister's eyes when he goes to answer these questions in QP, I would say certainly it seems like there is a cover-up taking place here, and that's really sad. That's sad for Canadians. That's sad for these women.
Bringing things a little closer to home now for just a moment, the application process for your 2021 Youth Advisory Board is now open, and it's open for young people between the ages of 16 and 24. Can you explain what this is all about?
Yeah, for sure, Hal. This is something that I just so enjoy, and that is, sitting around a table with young people and hearing their voices. So I take 8 people every year for a 1-year term, and they are between the ages of 16 and 24, and we meet monthly. And they set the agenda and they lead the meeting. And my job is to listen and to ask good questions and to glean from them. And so it's an opportunity to give constituents who are young in age, vibrant in spirit, and who have a passion for the community and political engagement to get involved and to have their voices heard while they develop a relationship with me over the course of a year.
I love that, giving young people a powerful voice. That's wonderful in our community. Now, on a more personal note, I heard you got engaged. Can you tell us a little bit about this young man?
Yes, Hal. Yes, so I just recently got engaged, and we'll be getting married at the end of June. So very excited about that. And his name is Victor, and he's from the prairies, And now he is responsible for facilitating trade and business relationships between Canada and India, which of course is a rising economy, and there's lots of opportunity there for Canada. And I believe that we make a good partnership. So I look forward to being able to introduce him to the community more and more as restrictions lift.
And he's also tall like you, right? So you guys can see eye to eye, right?
Yes, that is true. He's about 3 inches taller than me, so works out well.
Congratulations, Rachel. Very happy for you.
Thank you.
Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.